Hey, what's up, Superdads? So I'm here today with what sounds like a super simple thing that you can do, but look, I'm all about the highest leverage stuff you can do, the small changes you can make that will give you the biggest outcomes, and this absolutely qualifies for that. So what I'm talking about is basically practicing flexing various muscles. Okay, now before you say, what a stupid idea, so obvious, hear me out. If you have underdeveloped muscles somewhere in your body, like let's say your biceps aren't as developed as you'd like them to be, there are a couple possible reasons for that. Now, one obviously would be that you're not training them enough, or training them in the right way, or you're not eating enough, or something like that. There's something up with your training or nutrition. But assuming that that's not the case, and if you're following, good training principles, you're training consistently, you're training with high intensity, and you're training progressively. If you're checking those three boxes and you're eating enough, then you should be basically, in terms of your approach to training and nutrition, it should basically be squared away. So the other possible explanations, one might be that you just have, physiologically, you have some sort of, less than ideal setup, right? So like some people might have short muscle heads, right? So when their bicep, right, it connects, closer to their arm, and so it doesn't appear as big as if it were to connect longer down here, and so that gives the muscle belly, the size of the muscle, more. It appears to have more size, right? Because it does, right? And that's just genetics, and there's nothing you can do about that. But the other possible reason is that you have a poor connection to that muscle. And the way to test this is to try to flex only that muscle without actually using it to move your body, right? So I have a decent connection to my bicep, right? So I can sit here and I can just flex the bicep without actually, I don't need to move my arm. I don't need to pick up a weight from my bicep to flex. I can just flex it up. Same thing with, people's chest. The guys who can bounce their chest, right? They can do the same with their chest. It's because they have a decent connection to their pecs. And those guys tend to have better pec development. If you have muscles that are underdeveloped and you have trouble activating them in this way, there's a good chance that you just don't have the sort of neural pathways necessary to really get the most development out of that muscle. Because what's going to happen is, let's say I have a poor connection to my chest, for example, and I'm doing all these chest exercises like bench press and push-ups and things like that to try to get a bigger chest. But because I have a poor connection to my chest, most of the development might be happening in my triceps, and it's happening in my shoulders and things like that. And my chest isn't really developing all that much, right? So that's pretty frustrating, right? So one way to deal with that is basically just to focus on training the neural connection by isolating the muscle and attempting to flex it. This will help to create the neural pathway that you really need to activate the muscle during normal exercises. And it will also add a little bit more volume, and not the kind of trash volume that people do in the gym. What makes trash volume is that you are creating more fatigue than you are creating quality stimulus for change in the muscle, right? Because if you weren't creating all that fatigue, then you'd just be using the muscle, and there's not really much wrong with that. The problem is that you're creating all this fatigue, and you're predisposing yourself to injury from overuse and all these sorts of things. But flexing a muscle doesn't do that, right? I mean, I can just flex my arm like this basically as much as I want. I'm not going to injure myself doing this. I'm probably not going to overwork the muscle or something like that, right, from doing that. And look, intensity is the most efficient and reliable driver of muscular hypertrophy and strength development and things like this, right? Well, a little bit less of strength development because a lot of that is skill. But you get what my point is. However, there is also something to be said for a muscle that gets used a lot is going to tend to get bigger and stronger, even if it's not used at a high level of intensity. So, like, for example, people who either carry a lot of weight on their back, like people who do a ton of hiking with heavy sacks on their back, or who jump rope a lot, or boxers or things like this, or people who are overweight, for example, tend to have very large calves, right? And that's not because they're training them at super high intensities, right? It's just because they're constantly training them with some sort of meaningful amount of tension on them. And creating tension in the muscle like this is training with meaningful amounts of tension, right? So there's a story about Arnold Schwarzenegger where, you know, people would always come up to him and say like, "Hey, show me your muscle," and he would always show, he'd pull out his right bicep and show it to them. And what he noticed was, after some length of time, that his right bicep had begun to become much larger than his left, or noticeably larger than his left bicep. And he, connected the dots and realized, because he was training him the same way, realized that just all of the flexing that he was doing of his right bicep had added some more volume to the training and some more, meaningful stimulus for change. And so he started balancing out which muscle he flexed, and he was able to balance them out again. There's also something to be said for just the ability to use muscles on demand, something that we might call muscular proficiency. And this is very important, not only to get a muscle to work when you're doing an exercise for the muscle, but like if you're going to use a lot of the sort of training ideas that I post about on this channel and in this Facebook group and stuff, where you are like resisting yourself, these sorts of things, and the ability to create tension where you want tension really is, in my opinion, one of the major things that separates a beginner from an intermediate exerciser, right? The intermediate has so much more body control. They have so much more physiological awareness and muscular proficiency that they can use, and they can make an easy set, what would be an easy set for someone who had less skill, they can make it more difficult on themselves by selectively creating tension in antagonistic muscles and things like that. Okay, so long story short, it's a good idea to just connect to, flex, just create tension without actually creating motion in muscles that are underdeveloped, okay? I do this a lot with my calves because I have terrible calf genetics, first of all, and because they're stubborn muscle for almost anybody to grow, and because I have a bad connection to them. So that's like a triple whammy. But one thing that's definitely helped is when I'm just sitting in a chair and my calves have no real ability to move anything in my body, just to try to connect to them and flex them. And I noticed that I can connect much better to my right leg than to my left, which is a pretty clear indication that there's a connection issue, right? So trying to spend more time on that left one and really develop that connection so it's better, like the right one. Okay, so, give it a try. It's not going to take much time. You can do it whenever and wherever. You don't need any equipment for it, but just creating this habit, finding those muscles and really working on creating the connection to them. Just stick with it and you will develop more proficiency, guaranteed. Okay? Thanks for watching.